We're going to take a moment here for a few moments for a little teaching and begin with this little story. One day, a rabbi received a letter without a return address. It contained a single sheet of paper, and on it was written a single word in large, bold, capital letters, followed by an exclamation point. The word said, "Jerk!" The following Shabbat, the rabbi announced, "I've received numerous letters in my day from people who forgot to sign their name. But this week I received a letter from someone who signed their name but forgot to write a letter." The story illustrates that no rabbi is universally loved. In fact, sometimes rabbis can be downright offensive. In my own rabbinate, I tried to be mindful of the words of Rabbi Yisrael Salanter, the father of the Musar movement, who said, "The role of the rabbi is not only to comfort the afflicted, it's also to afflict the comfortable." This year, I'm guessing not too many of us are feeling very comfortable. How could we be? Here we are on our screens again, still in the grips of a tenacious global virus, with astonishing numbers lost and an equally astonishing number who refuse to acknowledge that this is happening or do anything about it. At the end of a wild year, we're growing accustomed to floods, hurricanes, crippled power grids, heat domes, hate crimes, the burning of millions of acres of trees and smoke pollution that creates crimson suns all the way to New York City. Normally, any one of these events would set a person reeling, would require healing. But living in a tsunami of life-changing events, there is little time to digest. And that doesn't mean that all of these don't take their toll on us. So, still pulling the thread of that Ahava Rabbah, that great love, through, I want to ask a question. The question is, our ancestors knew all about living life in an unraveling world. Both Mizrahi Jews and Ashkenazi Jews, for centuries, life was often a continuous flow of traumatic events. Yet we're here. So what can our ancestors teach us? What can we learn from them on this Rosh Hashanah that might give us a leg up in our day? And one legendary story, you might have heard it, stands out. It takes place in the 2nd century when the Roman Empire was bearing down on the Jews of Palestine. One rabbi, Shimon Bar Yochai, publicly pushed back against the Roman government, and with a bounty on his head, he fled for his life. He and his son, Elazar, took refuge in a cave. And there they studied Torah and meditated by day and by night, their bodies nourished by a single carob tree and a spring of water, which miraculously sprang up just outside their cave. Well, after living there for 12 years, word finally reached them that the Roman emperor had died and their death sentences had been lifted and they were free to come out. So they emerged from their cave to find life going on. Ordinary things were going on. Ordinary people plowed their fields and sold wares and carried on with life. Rabbi Shimon was aghast. "How can these people be so short-sighted?" he cried. "Just look at how they abandoned the spiritual life for this measly earthly existence." As father and son walked, their very gaze sent out beams of fire, scorching the farmer in his field, turning to ash the woman in the marketplace. Wherever they directed their judging eyes was instantly burned to a crisp. Just then, the bat kol. Now, the bat kol is the heavenly voice, really the voice of Shekhinah, the divine feminine, came from heaven and called out to them, "Rabbi Shimon, what are you thinking? Did you emerge from your isolation in order to destroy my world? Go back to your cave now. Duly admonished, the father and son returned to their cave for another 12 months until the Bat Kol finally announced they were free to go. But this time the Talmud says something happened, something changed. Rabbi Shimon emerged with humility. Wherever he looked, there flowed compassion. Wherever he gazed, there went healing. As you see, the story has some relevance to our moment, right? We too have run to save our lives. We too have taken shelter in our caves. Okay, well, a little plusher than Rabbi Shimon's and more wired in, grant you that. But we too have been out of circulation for a very long time. And we too are emerging with a lot of tension in the air. The story seems to be telling us what happens when we get cut off from the world, overly steeped in our own viewpoint. However righteous or brilliant or accurate our views may be, when we lose our feeling connection, our eros, our ability to relate, when we lose our basic human compassion, we can become dangerous. And notice how the tradition is casting its vote here, not for the elite, not for the mystical ascent, not even for Torah study. She is casting her vote for simple life on earth, for common people, for a loving eye, for humanity, which, by the way, shares a common root with the word humility, just as Adam in Hebrew, comes from the word Adamah, earth. Lest we be awed by pyrotechnics or extreme spiritual sports or the panache of zealotry, the voice of Shekhinah tells us very clearly, nothing supersedes living on this earth with menschlichkeit. That's a hard one to say. To be a mensch, basic human compassion and decency. And even the greatest among us must sometimes be sent back to our rooms to temper our fire. So we begin the new year with a sense of humility and without a lot of chachmas, that is, without our scorching analyses or brilliant theories, which aren't really helpful when the world is unraveling. What is helpful may be the simple recognition that being alive today is shocking. Some of us here suffered losses up close and personal, and some of us here have come through this year relatively okay, unscathed. I would venture to say that for all of us, our sense of order and coherence has been radically shaken up. To be awake today is to feel a kind of spiritual dizziness, or as Professor Aviva Zornberg calls it, to be overcome with theological vertigo. Theological vertigo, because our internal sense of order and meaning has been literally turned upside down when death is so pervasive and but a hair's breadth away, and life appears to be so random. What possible sense of providence, what possible sense of a caring God in the world can there be? Back at the cave, we can only imagine what Rabbi Shimon would do if he were newly emerging on this Rosh Hashanah. Well, this is my projection. He might be full of ire at the stupidity of those who take other people's lives and their own so lightly. He might be full of rage at those who steal women's dignity and sovereignty. He would want to scorch humans drunk on prophets who blithely destroy the natural world, or self-interested legislators who unravel democracy for their own gains. But wait, says the heavenly voice, wait, hold your fire, go back to your cave and figure out how to convert your ire into heartbreak, your contempt into compassion. Learn to be healers, not destroyers. There's enough destruction in my world, she says. Now is the time to be chastened by life's fragility and the suffering in every quarter. Now is the time to be quaking to feel the ground shifting beneath us, to learn the wisdom of insecurity, the Torah of insecurity. I want to tell you briefly about one other very pertinent ancestral tip that I found extremely useful for our time. It comes all the way from the 13th century when Maimonides and other scholars discussed the purpose of the shofar blast. What the heck, they said, what the heck is this wild and primitive sound that we make every year, blowing a ram's horn? Even in the 13th century, they were saying this. What does it mean when we say, Ashrei ha'am yodea truo, lucky are the people who know the shofar blast? On the one hand, the sages taught, the shofar blast is God saying to us, Tamlichuni, or in the language of the Queen's Gambit, crown me, crown me. Blow the shofar with a clarion call to announce a higher power in this world, to coronate me, the Creator, to declare a divine intelligence, an eternal power, hidden but ever present. On the other hand, the rabbis argue, are you kidding? The shofar isn't the sound of a triumphant trumpet at all. It's closer to a sound of an animal in pain. It's somewhere between anacha, a groan, and yalala, a wailing of distress. It's the howl that King Lear makes when he loses his beloved Cordelia. It's the sound of loss. And here again, I'm following the scholarship of Professor Zornberg, quoting the Metzudat David. The wail of the shofar, he said, is the sound of one who has lost faith. The sound of despair at the loss of order and meaning in the world. The truah is the sound of our questions, asking, how can I live in a world in which such injustice reigns? Is this really your creation, God? I was so comforted to know that our ancestors were asking the same questions that we are. I truly love that they were having this discussion in the 1200s. They were saying, on the one hand, the shofar blast is God telling us, declare me, declare my presence in the world. And on the other, the shofar blast means our wailing and despair over a world gone awry. Both together are true. Both are what Jews are here to do. To declare a higher power and to question everything. And the tension between these two galls us and goads us, and it throws us out of our complacent caves. As we saw in our story, the Shekhinah wants none of our fire. Please, please, she begs, don't add to the heat on my planet. Forget your scorching analyses, your Twitter pylons that don't help a soul. Start rather with the cool, clear water of Tashlich. Cool yourself with the discipline and the humility of not knowing. And do the work that is right here in front of you. Build gardens, plant trees, raise kind children, help each other, and be human. Work with what I have given you in your hands to make things better. Act as if everything you do matters, as if all life were in your hands, because it is. She says, help me, partner with me to redeem my world. Tonight I'm thinking of the people who got humble and got human and asked what they had on hand. Where is my immoral imagination to redeem this world? I'm thinking of Shirley Chisholm, the first Black Congresswoman, who insisted against all advice in 1972 on visiting her rabid opponent, the notorious racist George Wallace, in the hospital after he was shot. She held his hand, a Black woman holding a white hand, and prayed with him, and that hospital visit changed his life. I'm thinking of Loretta Ross, a Black activist who went into the prisons to teach male prisoners about her experience of being assaulted as a young woman. She met them as human beings with compassion, not judgment, and she created a safe environment where they were able to share their own experiences and her students went on to create a movement called Prisoners Against Rape. I'm thinking of corporate leaders all over the world. We don't hear enough about them, like Brian Chesky of Airbnb, who just partnered with HIAS, the Hebrew Immigrant Society, to give free housing to 20,000 Afghani families and thousands more climate refugees around the world. And, of course, I'm thinking of the Supreme Court Justice, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, tonight, whose first yahrzeit it is right now. A Rebbe in her own right, Justice Ginsburg did her own version of comforting the afflicted and afflicting the comfortable. She was defeated often, but her victories were for us all. Of her defeats, she said, "Sure, I'm dejected, of course, but only momentarily. But then you go on to the next challenge and you give it your all." And she cautioned us, don't be distracted by emotions like anger, envy, or resentment. They just zap your energy and waste your time. Indeed, for those of us on earth alive and awake on this Rosh Hashanah, in which not one people here and there, but all people everywhere on this planet are touched by existential threat, let's not be distracted by unnecessary emotions that take us off course, but make use of what we have in our hands. Ashrei ha'am yodea trua. Let's be the people who knows the inner meaning of the shofar's blast, the call of the wild God who says, "Here I am, hidden in plain sight. Crown me. Rail at me if you must. Wail at your despair. But keep your hand on that plow. Let's redeem this world together." Shana Tova. May all of us be gifted with another year of this blessed life.